everybody. Welcome to the Wrestling Issues Podcast. My guest today is Jeff Watkins. Jeff was a two-time head coach, state champion for Wichita West in 1994 and I believe 2006. And he was also an assistant coach at Wichita Heights, they also won a state championship. I'll have to find out what year. He was also the head coach of the 94 team that beat my senior year team by 1/2 of a point. So I'm looking forward to talking to him. I've wanted to talk to him for a long time. So without further ado, let's bring him in. How you doing, Mr. Watkins?
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Of course. I've wanted to talk to you for a long, long time. What are you up to these days?
Well, I retired from teaching about 10 years ago, and but I still continue to coach. I help coach football at Cape and Mount Carmel, and I've also helped coach wrestling at Cape and Mount Carmel the last couple of years. Along with that, try to keep my wife happy, which sometimes is not as easy as it sounds, but she's a pretty good lady. So playing with grandchildren, coaching a little bit on the side, and that's mainly what we do.
How long have you been married now?
You would have to ask me that. I was married in 84, so that would make 42 years.
Okay. Man, life goes fast, doesn't it?
It does go fast. It seemed like just yesterday that I met her for the first time.
You know, when I was in high school, it seemed like you had your whole life in front of you. But actually, even high school kind of went fast. Like, up till age 12, seemed like it took forever, like summer vacations.
Right.
And 3 months back then was a long time. And
oh, yeah.
Now 3 months is just nothing. And I don't know.
We actually got 3 months back then. These days, they don't get 3 months off.
Yeah, they don't, do they?
It seems like they get out in end of May and back at it the first week or second week of August.
Yeah, and they also, these kids today wrestle so much. It's crazy how many matches they can get in high school.
Exactly. Well, every sport, it seems like, has turned into a year-round sport, and if you want to be on the top echelon, you pretty much have to commit to it. And where when I grew up, we could play multiple sports, and we weren't really expected to train for the other sports during the off season. We were expected to maybe do something if we weren't playing the sport, but we were encouraged to play other sports, which nowadays I don't think it's that way anymore.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. Yeah, when I was a kid, there were seasons, to wrestling, and now, I've been helping out a little bit with this kids club, and, my boy's been going like once a week, just easing him into it. And they go all the time. I'm like, well, when does the season end? Like, I kind of want to tell my boy, like, this is when season starts and this is when it ends, and then you have an off season where you kind of try to get better at it, or you work out, or whatever. But yeah, it's just different. My nephew, he's going to be a senior, and he'll wrestle like, I don't know, 9 times in a weekend, and I'm like, we just didn't get to do that. I mean, Lord knows how much better we probably would have gotten if we did. I
know in Wichita, there, on any given day, there's rooms that have their rooms open. So, they say we open mat time on this day, this day, this day. And it seems like there's always somewhere a guy can go that there's 20 or 30, 40 kids there scrapping it out. Yeah.
I mean, it's great for the sport, but it's just a different thing for sure. And you mentioned Cape and Mount Carmel, that you're coaching there a little bit, and I when you said that, it reminded me of, like, they had some great teams in like the 80s, right?
They did, with Dwayne Miller was the head coach, and they had Hirschbergers, Bonces. You could just go down the line of guys that were good, and one reason why they were so good was they were the first really wrestling club in Wichita Wrestling Club. They were the first ones that did wrestle in the off season.
Okay. Man, that was a great kids club, that Wichita Wrestling Club with the WWC on their singlets.
Yep.
Those guys were freaking studs. Were you a part of that?
I wasn't. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about wrestling until I got to high school. I did go out and there was a guy named Doc Hagen who was a famous guy from Oklahoma State who had some sons that wrestled here, and he was a doctor, and he had a farm, and he had outside of town. I think it's where Andover is now, but there wasn't anything out back then. And we could go out there on Saturday mornings, and he had a barn, and he would fire up the heater in there, and guys like Roy Ozier would be there. I would go out there, and some guys like that, and we'd go out there, and he would sit on the side and tell us what we were doing wrong. He never got up out of his chair. He would just sit there and watch us. I don't know if he even ever wrestled, but he was around wrestling, and he fixed one of my cauliflower ears one day when it started swelling up. I went out there and he drained it and was telling me all the things to do and don't do.
Yeah, it's a shame that Wichita State is what it's called. It's a shame they don't have a wrestling team because there are so many good dudes around there. And sometimes people just don't even want to leave home to go away somewhere. There's so many good people in that area. We could talk all day long and not scratch the surface of all the names. Where did you go to high school?
I went to high school at Wichita North.
Okay.
And North hasn't been very good lately in very many sports. The neighborhoods that feed into North have changed quite a bit. The economic status has changed quite a bit. But we were pretty solid. When I was there, we won 4 straight City League football championships, and we didn't ever win a wrestling championship because of, obviously, we just mentioned them, Cape and Mount Carmel. Nobody could beat them. They went on I take that back. We beat them. One year, they lost 4 matches. They lost to us, to South, to Heights, and maybe it was to Carroll. But then they went on like a 9 or 10 year winning streak where they didn't lose a duel.
Wow.
And but we were one of the last teams that beat them, and we beat them 32. Now this is a story that you haven't heard before. We beat them 32-30. Now back then, you didn't go into overtime. You tied in a duel, and each team got 2 points if you had a tie. We had a tie. I believe it was 98 pounds. Our 98 pounder tied their 98 pounder. Then they started beating us, and they were ahead of us 30-2. We had 5 weights left, and one of them was going to be Roy Ozier versus me. Now, I was a senior, and Roy Ozier was only a freshman. Now, we had wrestled out at Doc Hagen's before on the mat. We'd never wrestled an actual match, but I was pretty sure, because I was a lot more mature physically and older than Roy, I'm pretty sure I would have beaten him. But instead of wrestling me, they decided to forfeit. But we pinned 4 of their guys and forfeited that match. We ended up winning 32-30 because we got 5 6-point wins, including the forfeit where they forfeited to me. And then Roy went on and won the state championship, obviously, that year. I got second that year. In 6A, he was in 5A.
Was he a 4-timer?
He was a 4-timer, right?
He had to have been one of...
They were in 4A. There was no 6A at that time.
Yeah, he had to have been one of the first 4-timers, right?
He was right there. I think there was one before him. I don't remember who, but I don't think he was the very first one. But I know Doug Duell, I think, out of St. Francis or Colby, wherever he was from. I think he might have been the first one.
Okay. And so you didn't start until, first of all, there's so much going through my mind right now, but I want to rewind just a second and ask, do you remember Corey Jones from Mount Carmel?
I do remember Corey. Corey is a good friend of mine.
Okay.
I see Corey from time to time. Corey and his brother were both really good wrestlers, and then they had a brother that was a really good baseball player, and then obviously their dad was a great golfer.
The things I remember are insane. When I was a kid going to a freestyle tournament, Eric Aiken was in the van, and his dad, John Aiken, and I remember him saying, "I want you to wrestle Corey Jones today," because they were always hunting the best people.
Right.
And that's what made Eric Aiken special, was that he
Mhm.
would hunt down guys that initially would kick his ass,
Right.
and he would always get them back eventually. I remember Corey Jones beat him in the state finals like 9-2, and when Eric was a freshman, and I think it may have been that summer, and you can ask him this, but I think Eric may have pinned him in freestyle. He was just that guy. I mean, he would seek these guys out, and that's why he ended up doing what he did. But I always remember that name, and I love wrestlers' names. I think wrestlers have the best names, and I always thought Corey Jones was a cool name. You know, everybody I knew growing up named Corey was good at wrestling. Did you ever notice that?
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Think about it.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'm
Corey
sure
was a
there was
great
some.
wrestler, and he went on to wrestle back east at I think uh, Bloomsburg or one of those Edinburgh or one of those small schools. He went for 2 years, and he made it to the NCAA tournament his freshman year. But he won state as a senior at 105. Well, back then the lowest weight class in college was 118.
Yeah,
Now it's 125, and he just struggled to be big enough. He was weighing naturally about 120, but the guys he was wrestling were all weighing 135, 140 in the off season,
yeah.
and he just struggled to physically to be able to match up. And finally, his junior year or his sophomore year, about halfway through the season, I think they had brought in a freshman who was some hot shot wrestler, and he beat him off the team, and he decided that he was done with wrestling at that point.
Okay. Yeah, that 118 class was tough, man. Those guys, it was a much stockier weight class than the 125s are for some reason, and yeah, they were short, and those guys would cut down from, like, back in the day, we cut so much weight it was just stupid, and those guys would cut from 140, 150. So anyway, your high school career, and you also mentioned Wichita North, which always makes me think of Jared Byrne, the toughest match I had my senior year.
Yeah.
That's the closest to dying I've ever come in a match.
Who was that?
Jared Byrne.
The Coach Nick's son. He went to Wichita South, actually.
Oh, was it South? Okay.
Yeah, he went to South.
Okay.
Wichita North, of course, is known for Barry Sanders
That's right.
and Lynette Woodard, the great women's basketball player.
Weren't the Drydens from Wichita North?
Dryden's were at North. I got to coach. That was right when I got out of college, and I came back to coach. And the Drydens were on the team. They were both freshmen.
Okay.
And they weighed, I believe, if I remember right, they weighed 67 and 66 pounds, and weren't big enough to wrestle 98 as freshmen.
Yeah.
Because you had to weigh 85, I believe, to wrestle 98.
Wow. They were little guys.
So they were little, and they used to get on. Those two guys would scrap, and they would get on each other. If one of them, they had contest at who could weigh the most that next, when they weighed in, and if one of them was a pound more over, they really would talk trash to the other one who was lighter.
There was also a guy from Wichita North named Matt Shepard, and
Matt Shepard was a good wrestler.
he got second as a freshman. And I'll tell you what, the things I remember, when my very first wrestling tournament, my very first state wrestling tournament, I was 7 years old, and I won my district, and he was the first lesson I ever got in Seeds Don't Matter out west, because he kicked my butt in that first round. Yeah, he was the fourth place seed, and I was the number one guy, and my dad thought I was going to win it and all that, and I got humbled pretty quickly as a 7-year-old by Matt Shepard.
Yeah, Matt was a good wrestler. He was a good wrestler. Trying to think of, there was one guy from North that wrestled for Nebraska. I'm trying to think of his name. Who was a two-timer, but I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Who was really good.
Okay. So let's get into your career. You didn't start until you were, back then, was it sophomore year?
Sophomore year we didn't have ninth graders in the high school. That was another advantage that Cape had. they had ninth graders that actually were in high school. We didn't have any ninth graders in high school. Now, you could go as a ninth grader over to the high school and compete, but no ninth graders actually went to the high school. So I didn't know anything about wrestling. We had a little wrestling tournament at the junior high I went to, and the North High guys came over and reffed it, and I won the tournament that day. All I knew was a half Nelson, a bar arm half. That's all I knew, and I could turn everybody on their back and pin them with a bar arm half. But I was in awe of these North High guys who came over and reffed the matches. And so that kind of made me think about it. But the next year, what really got me to think about wrestling was I played football. I was so as a freshman, as a eighth grader, as a ninth grader. I didn't really mature until I was between my sophomore and junior year. And I played on the sophomore team. I don't think I started every game, but I played a decent amount. Well, our head football coach, who was kind of a legend, named Bob Scheffler, of the varsity, came down and talked to our freshman team and said, if you want to play football next year, these are your choices. You can play another sport or you can lift weights with me. And I thought, dang, I know this guy's going to be hard. I don't know if I want to lift weights with him because he's going to be hard. That's going to be hard. I think I want to play football next year, so I guess I got to play another sport. And I thought, well, basketball, I'm not too good. I can't make a layup. Swimming, I can barely swim to the end of the pool. Gymnastics, I'm not even sure I can do a pull-up. I guess I'll go out for wrestling. And that's the reason why I went out for wrestling. And I got beat on my whole sophomore year. I mean, beat on. I was a 155-pounder, and the 98-pounders and 105-pounders would volunteer to wrestle with me if I didn't have a partner.
But you made a miraculous turnaround then, because you were state champ as a junior?
No, I never was state champ. I was second state.
Okay.
I went to state as a junior, and my senior year, I wrestled 185 as a junior, even though I only weighed about 175 because we had a senior at 167 that I couldn't beat. Well, I could beat him about halfway through the year, but I thought, he's a senior. I'll just let him stay there because I don't want to beat him out of his spot. And the guy who I was having to beat every day was Tim Blackwell, who ended up being a grand state champion, a two-time state champion. He was a true at 185-pounder, but I could beat him. And then my senior year, I decided to go down to 167, and Tim was in the lineup. I was in the lineup. We had our upper weights were pretty good. And that was my only loss my senior year, was to your guy from Shawnee Mission West. I don't remember his first name. His last name was Carpenter.
I think it may have been Ed Carpenter.
He went on. My understanding is he went on to play in the NFL, so maybe he was a little better athlete than I was. Maybe that's why I got beat.
Well, it was I think the name was Ed or Steve. I think there were two of them.
Yeah, I think Steve sounds right to me.
And the only reason I know is because I looked at that wall my whole, youth, knowing the names that were up there. And if you won state, you got a gold brick. And I finally got a gold brick on that wall, and like 3 years later, they destroyed the room. And I'm like, well, I wish I would have known they were knocking down that room. I would sure like to have had my brick.
Yeah.
Because it was a cool thing. West only had, back then anyway, maybe 18. I think Dan Irwin was maybe their 18th state champion.
Wow.
So what made you take I'm sorry, how did you say you did your junior year? I know you said you went to state, but how was your record?
I didn't place. I think I won a match or won two matches and lost two. But I was one match away from placing, and then that was when I remember this very clearly. I really had, about halfway through the year, everything just started coming together as far as me getting to be a better wrestler. And when I walked off the mat my junior year, I said, I want to be a state champion, and I'm going to do everything I can to be a state champion next year, and I'm going to work out every single day until I make it until the state tournament happens next year. And I did that. Many days I was lifting weights in the gym by myself or running by myself, but I made the decision. I'm gonna work out every day, and I ended up losing 7-6 to, I believe it was Steve Carpenter. was his name. We were both undefeated in the state that year. Neither one of us had seen each other. Because back then, Kansas City didn't come down to Wichita too much. Wichita didn't go up to Kansas City too much, so we didn't see each other very much. We didn't cross those lines, and you didn't get a lot of matches either back then. But I remember walking off the mat after I got beat, and I was disappointed, but I wasn't crushed because I said, you worked out every single day to try to achieve a goal. You came up just a little short, but you did everything you knew how to do to try to accomplish that, and there's nothing to be ashamed of about that. So I came to terms with taking second. It didn't ruin my life or anything.
Yeah, it doesn't. In the grand scheme of things, we all want to do certain things and all that, but in the grand scheme of things, it's like you said, it's the fact that you stuck to what you said you were going to do. I remember my junior year sitting in the stands and thinking to myself, I am going to win it next year. I went through the lineup and was like, okay, this guy's coming back. This guy's no way he's going to make it. And, Bobby Lashley was coming back, but I was like, there's no way that guy's making 140 again.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, I'm going to win it. I know I am. And I just made that my thing, but it's once it kind of happens, it's kind of a letdown, as far as what you thought it was going to be, but the pursuit of it that's where the good stuff is,
Well, that's very true. And it seems like in the success that I've had coaching, the success that I had as a wrestler, you're right. The pursuit of it, when you actually achieve it, the achievement is great, but it never ends up bringing the satisfaction you think it will. It never is it able to just. I thought, well, if I win a state championship, that's going to be the greatest thing ever. Shoot, when we won a team state championship in wrestling, I thought this is the greatest thing ever. I got up the next day and walked down the block. Nobody on my block knew we won a state championship. Nobody knew. Nobody cared. There were a few people. I thought, man, the whole world's going to come to an end or come to a stop to celebrate us winning the state championship. That's not the way it worked.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember, I wanted to be in the classroom when they announced who won a state title over the weekend. And for some reason, I was out walking in the hallways, and I was like, dang it, you missed your chance to get a round of applause in your class. And then, I got congratulations throughout the day, and then a day or two later, people just kind of quit remembering, And
life moves on.
Yeah, it sure does. And so it is the pursuit of it, and, if I could go back in time, man, I would go to kids wrestling tournaments. I had so much fun at kids wrestling. And high school tournaments, my favorite part was riding home on the bus with my friends and going to eat and that kind of stuff,
I think that's a common thing in every sport. Going and eating with your buddies after a competition, that's a great time.
Yeah. Especially wrestlers, because we were always so dang hungry.
Right. I think a little bit more than we needed to.
Well, I got to tell you, man. I know there weren't probably as many kids programs back then, but the fact that you started as a sophomore and made it all the way undefeated to the finals as a senior, I'm always amazed by people who do those kind of things. You obviously had some physical attributes. That's one thing I always remembered about you. A lot of wrestling coaches, they get pretty fat and don't look like wrestlers anymore. And you never lost that look. You always had, you had that slick back hair, and you're this buff dude. And you weren't how tall are you?
I'm about 5'10".
Okay.
Always weigh in about 170.
Okay. For some reason, I thought you were shorter than that because you just look so stocky to me. Yeah, you always looked the part, and a lot of coaches, especially back then, just didn't.
Well, I was a physical education teacher, and I had determined back when I decided I wanted to coach physical education, I wasn't going to be like a lot of my physical education teachers who didn't look like they could do a push-up or a pull-up or run a half a mile. I said, if I'm going to teach physical education, I'm going to be physically fit, and I want to be able to beat all the wrestlers in my room. I don't want to. If I'm going to coach them, I want to be able to beat them, and I want to be able to say I can do any. If I ask you to do something, I can also do what I'm asking you to do. So I'm not just out there making you do stuff that I can't do myself.
Yeah. Man, I wrestled this high school kid the other day, and he was a big, strong kid, and he hit me with a pretty nice slide by, and I don't think that I don't think I had been scored on yet in the, I don't know, dozens of times I've wrestled now, and I don't think anybody had scored on me. And that little sucker the other night, he hit me with a sweet slide by, and it bothered me for 2 days.
That's funny. Eldon, Eldon Edwards. We used to go to old timers tournaments. Well, before we went to old timers tournaments, we went to regular tournaments. This was when we were both out of college and both coaching, and we both had made the at least this is how I remember it. We both had decided if we ever get beat by a high school kid, we are hanging up that's the day we're hanging up our shoes. And I remember we went to a tournament down in Ark City, and Chris Calder, who was a two-time state champion for Ark City, I went to this. They put me in a bracket. I was in the open bracket, and there were state champions and everything else. And I had to wrestle like 6 matches. Every 45 minutes, my name was coming up. And finally, the last match, I had to wrestle Chris Calder for the for the championship of the tournament. He beat me by a point, and that was the last. I told Eldon, I said, "That's it. I'm hanging up my shoes. I got beat by a high school kid today. I'm done competing in competition and tournaments during the summer." And I think Eldon, if I remember right, Eldon might have got beat that day too, and he hung him up too. I think we both hung him up on the same day as far as competing in tournaments.
And how old were you at that point?
I was probably 26, 27.
Yeah, man. Well, there's no shame in that, especially to an Ark City two-timer. Man, Ark City. Gosh, I had a podcast with Wayne Jackson, and he's another guy I could just talk to all day. My favorite podcasts are the Kansas ones because I have so many connections and I have such a memory for all those names, especially Ark City guys. I really want to talk to Justin Ware, but he's such an enigma.
Yeah. Wayne Jackson is a great man. The thing that I always think about Wayne Jackson is whenever we go to a tournament, he would have these freshmen. And back then, a lot of coaches didn't follow the sport outside of the season. They weren't into it year round. And Wayne would have he'd have always on his team 2 or 3 freshmen that were 10-time kids state champions. And these coaches sitting in the room at the seating meeting didn't know anything about these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And Wayne would just be sitting back there, and they'd be putting their guys up for seeds. And I'm looking at Wayne like, are you going to put your guy up or what? And so they'd be down to like, I said, wait a minute, guys. You're not seeing the best guy in the whole bracket. Well, who's that? Well, it's this guy. Well, he's just a freshman. And Wayne would go, yeah, he's just a freshman. He needs to get a real season. I said, come on, Wayne. And he would always be sandbagging. Those freshmen ended up just kicking everybody's butt.
Yeah, there was a lot of them, dude. You remember that name, Scotty Goodale? I'd like to talk to him. Yeah, he went on to be a Division II national champion, and
I think he was a 4-timer too.
He won 3, and he got second, I think, as a freshman, or maybe he may have been one of those guys. No, you know what? I'll tell you what. He didn't place his freshman year because he had to wrestle up at 112, even though he weighed. He wasn't even a 103 pounder, but Justin Ware was there, so Justin made him go up to 12. So he didn't place as a freshman. I don't believe, but I know he won it 3 times, and. He was a tough little dude, man. Him and Derek Lane used to have some great matches. Derek Lane, I don't know if you remember that name, but Scotty was one of the only people that ever wrestled Derek more than once that Derek never beat. I mean, Derek was a stud. But anyway, I'm sorry, I could go on tangents like that all day. So did you get into coaching right away?
I did. I went to Shadron State. I went to Dodge City JUCO first, and I played football and I wrestled. Now I went there to wrestle, and that's all I did my first year. But our football coach, and I thought I was a pretty good football player, and our wrestling coach was also the head football coach, and he said, "Well, I need you to why don't you come out for football next year?" I said, "Coach, I played defensive line in high school. I weigh 185 pounds. I'm too little." And he goes, "Well, I've watched you play. I think you could play." I said, "Coach, you don't want me on the team because when I don't start, I'm going to be over complaining on the sidelines. I'm not a good team player. You don't want me on the team." He goes, "Why don't you let me decide that?" He goes, "Why don't you come out next year, and if after a week, if I don't think you can play for us, I'll let you know, and you can check your equipment in. You're still here on a wrestling scholarship." Da, 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 da. So I did, and after the first week, he said, "You're going to play every day, or every down." So I ended up playing football and doing pretty good. And then the next year, so then I wrestled and played football my sophomore year. The next year, I went back one more semester and played football. But then I graduated the semester, didn't know what I was going to do, was getting some football. I was getting more football offers than I was wrestling offers. And I thought, well, I'm just going to take the semester off. And I worked in the oil field out by Great Bend, Kansas. The hardest job I ever did. We worked 5 days a week, and we worked sun up to sundown. Back then, I think minimum wage was like $4 an hour. That's about what I got paid.
Wow.
And I said, I need to go back to college. So I ended up, Shadron State offered me a wrestling scholarship up in Nebraska, and that's where I went to wrestle in Nebraska. So I wrestled there for 2 years. And then I graduated a semester from Shadron State, and I said, well, I need to get a teaching job somewhere. And I had a minor in business and a major in physical education. I thought, well, I need to graduate semester. I need to get a teaching job the second semester so that the next year I'll have a half a year experience on everybody that's graduating. So there's a little town in Nebraska called Cody, Nebraska. It had like 125 people in the town. The school had 48 kids in the high school, 48 total. And I was teaching all the business classes. They hired me a semester, and they said, hey, we need somebody to coach the girls' basketball team. And I said, the girls' basketball team? Oh, yeah, we need somebody to coach the girls' basketball team. This was when I was interviewing for the job, and they said, can you coach? I said, well, I wrestled and played football in college. I mean, I understand the rules of basketball. I've never coached basketball. They said, well, we got a girl coming in tomorrow interviewing for the same job. Whoever says they can coach the girls' basketball team, I'm going to give them the job. I said, well, I'm pretty sure I can coach girls' basketball. And the principal goes to yells out to say, hey, Sally, call that girl and tell her we don't need her to come in. We just hired our business teacher, and he's going to coach girls' basketball. So I get back to school second semester. They gave me I had 5 preps. I taught accounting, shorthand, typing, and so I get back to school. The day I get back to school from Christmas break, my first day of teaching, the principal comes up and goes, hey, your basketball team he goes, I got a sub for you in the afternoon because your basketball team has a game today. I said, my basketball team? Yeah, you're the head girls basketball coach. You guys got a game this afternoon. I said, who's on I don't even know who's on the basketball team. They said, all the girls in the school are on the basketball. We got 25 girls. They're all on the basketball team. And I said, well, I don't even know any of these girls. And I'm like 22 years old. All these girls are making goo-goo eyes at me. I'm just out of college. And, I'm the newest thing to ever happen in the town. They're looking at me all crazy. And the principal goes, I said, well, can I at least have a practice? Well, when do you want to practice? I said, I don't know, lunchtime? Okay, lunchtime. So we go in and have practice at lunchtime, and these girls are, and the principal comes up to me and he goes, no pressure. We've had the team 3 years and we've never won a game. I said, okay. And he was right. There was no pressure. And I get in there and I look at these girls and I said, we're going to do one thing. We're going to play defense. I said, I don't understand all the nuances of basketball, but I'm going to assign you to a player, and you're going to stay with that player. And I watched the girls, figured out who I thought that had the most talent, and I ended up starting 3 sophomores and 2 freshmen, and benching, unbeknownst to me, 3 of the school board members' daughters who were seniors because they didn't hustle that much in the practice. Well, I had to drive the school. I had to also take a quick lesson on how to drive the dang school bus, and I had these 20-some girls on the bus, and they have an 8-track player on the bus, and they've got a Merle Haggard 8-track tape, and they're playing this Merle Haggard 8-track tape, and one of the girls goes, "You don't mind if we chew, do you?" And I said, "Chew? What? Chew what?" Skull. I said, and all these girls were from big ranches. This whole town was made up of a ranching community. And I said, well, you better not chew on the trip down because I don't know what the school rules are. Maybe next time. But we get down there, and there were 4 teams. It was a 4-team tournament. And this is my first thing I'm going to coach after college. And I go, and since we were the number 4 seed, because we had never won a game in 4 years, we're playing the number 1 seed. And I go up to one of the coaches and said, "Hey, what's so special about this team that we're playing?" They said, "Well, they got Susie Smith. She's averages like 20 points a game. She's going to like Air Force on a basketball scholarship." I said, "Dang, she must be pretty good." I said, most points we've ever scored in the game is like 15, and she averages over 20. So a girl that I watched in practice named Bridget Nollett, she was kind of stocky, kind of a hustler. You could tell she'd been throwing hay bales her whole life. I said, "Bridget, I want you to guard Susie Smith." And her eyes got big, and I go, "Are you scared?" "Well, she's pretty good." I said, "I want you to stay on her. If she goes and sits on the bench, I want you to go sit beside her. You stop." And I said, "On the tip, I want you to go up. I want you to hit her right with your shoulder, right into her arm, and say, 'I own you tonight.'" And she's looking at me, and I said, "Say it to me." She's, I said, "Not like that, like this." Well, she goes out there, and she elbows this girl and knocks her down to the ground. She says, "I own you tonight." And I don't know what happened to that girl, but at halftime, we were ahead 8-6. We were playing full court. If we didn't have a layup, we didn't have a chance to score, and we barely had a chance to score on a layup. But we ended up upsetting the number 1 seed in the tournament. We lost the next day to the number 2 seed, but I'm like, they all think I'm the greatest basketball coach to ever live when I get back to town. And we ended up winning about half our games that year. And back then, the starting pay in 1980 was $8,900 a year. And since I got there at semester, I was only getting paid half that. So I got paid half that, and I was getting paid, I think, $500 to drive the school bus and coach girls basketball and coach track. And when I told them the next year that I was going to leave and go to a school in Iowa and coach wrestling, they were upset. We'll give you $200 more. I said, "It's not the money." They said, I said, I was just pretending I was a basketball coach. I'm really not a basketball coach. But that was the start of my coaching career, coaching girls basketball in Cody, Kilgore, Nebraska.
That's an awesome story. It reminds me of like a Bad News Bears movie or something.
We had some Bad News Bears, that's for sure.
Yeah.
but you grow to love those because I still even hear for some of them. They're 60 years old now.
That's awesome. So when you went to Iowa, was that to coach at a high school?
It was to coach at a high school. It was in Iowa. They had class A, B. I think is it A, B, C.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. I don't remember what, but they have 3 classes. I don't remember how they number them. We were in the middle class, and the school I went to was returning state champions in football, and we had a good team, and they also had a pretty good wrestling team, and I was going to be assistant wrestling coach, assistant football coach, and to teach business at this school. It was in Sibley, Iowa, way up in the northwest corner of Iowa. And here's a little aside. So we had kids club. There was a school. We were in Sibley. 8 miles away was our big rival, Sheldon, Iowa. And our kids club, we would practice on Tuesdays in Sheldon, our kids, and on Thursdays everybody would come to Sibley. So we partnered together in kids club, but we practiced in the two different schools. Well, I went to some of the kids clubs practice, and I noticed these two twins on Sheldon's team that were like first graders. I said, "Dang, those kids are they get after it." Tom and Terry Brands.
No kidding.
Tom and Terry Brands were on, and so I got to kind of hang. I didn't know they were going to end up being the Tom and Terry Brands, but man, they were go getters, was like kindergartners and first graders.
Huh.
I was in Sibley, Iowa. I'll tell you a good football story about Sibley, Iowa. So when I got there, I was the offensive line coach. We only had 4 coaches, and we were ranked number 1 in the state. We had won the state the year before. We had a lot of players back. We were good, but we played in a conference that everybody played in the upper level conference. Even though I think it was AB. We played in a conference of all A schools, even though we were B. And back then they determined who was going to the state playoffs by points. And if we played an A school, which was bigger than us, and beat them, we got a lot of points. If we lost to them, we even got more points than a B school who played a C school, which is a class lower. They didn't get as many points as we did, even though we lost and they won.
Huh.
Well, I didn't know all those rules. And my other job on the football team was I was in charge of the kickoff team. And I was idealistic just out of college. And I told our head football coach, I said, we don't need to waste time practicing kickoff during practice. I'll bring my 10 or 15 guys I got on the kickoff team in the morning, and we'll spend 30 minutes in the morning working on kickoff so we got time during practice. And I thought, this is great. So the football coach agreed to do that. So I bring my kids in 3 times a week, and we'd work on, and we could pooch kick. We could do every kind of kickoff imaginable. We get to the first game, and I said, Coach, we're really good at onside kick. Let's onside kick. And our coach was real by the numbers. He goes, now, Coach, if they start on the 20-yard line, then they got a 20% chance of scoring. They start on the 50-yard line, they got a 50%. And he'd always quote these statistics to me. He would never let me onside kick. I said, Coach, we're going to get it. Well, we went through this. We lost to 1 game during the year, and that was to the number 1 ranked team in the higher class, Class A, named Emmitsburg, and they had a bunch of good wrestlers from Emmitsburg, Iowa. But we lost to them, but we beat everybody else. We're ranked number 1 in the state. We're playing our last game against Storm Lake. We had 300 kids in our high school. They had 2,000.
Wow.
And we go out, and Storm Lake had like a 500 record. We're like 8-1. We've beaten a bunch of teams bad that have beat them. We go out, we kick off to them. They don't move the ball at all. They punt to us. We run it. We take it down, stuff it down their throat, score, and we're ahead 7-0. I go, Coach Melbreck. His name was Coach Melbreck. Coach Melbreck, that's onside kick. We might need to onside kick once the playoffs get here. We could practice on it right now. And expect him to say no like he had all year long. He goes, onside kick. And I said, what? And he calls onside kick.
Nice.
We go out onside kick, and they recover. They make 3 fourth downs, convert 3 fourth down plays, and end up scoring on us and tying the game up.
Oh, shit.
And I don't know what happened to our team. We just fell apart. We fumbled in the fourth quarter. They scored and beat us 14-7.
Oh, man.
Now, I didn't know the year before Sibley had 2 losses and made it to the state playoffs, and there was a team that went undefeated in Class B, the same class we were, but they played all Class C schools, smaller schools. Well, we had more points than they did, and they didn't make the playoffs even though they went undefeated. So they made a new rule the year I came in. You got 25 bonus points if you went undefeated. So we went from being the number 1 ranked team in the state, losing to Storm Lake, which was no Yeah, they were a way bigger school than us too. We were the best team in the state, but those 25 points that one of those teams got kicked us out of the playoffs, and we did not make the playoffs that year
Oh wow.
because I won the onside. And afterwards, we pull into town after the game. And they got our coach hanging from the light pole with a big fire him. They got a dummy hanging from the light. Coach Melbrecht needs to be fired. He just won the state championship, and the town newspaper guy, the sports guy, is in the locker room saying, "Now, Coach Melbrecht," and I'm sitting there listening. He goes, "You've coached a lot of games here and had a lot of success, but this year you're not going to get to go to the playoffs. And it seems like the thing." He goes, "I've watched all your games. I've never seen you onside kick before, and that seems like that's what changed the game around." And I'm just waiting for him to. He never threw me under the bus, and he goes, "I just thought it was the thing to do."
Wow. What a stand-up guy. What a stand-up guy that he wouldn't throw you under the bus like that.
And get this, they fired him that year, and he went down to Louisiana and won like 3 more state championships.
Huh. Well, you probably did him a favor then.
Because we didn't make the playoffs that year.
Wow. Yeah, man, it's crazy how sports can take a turn like that, I've seen people mentally in wrestling, good or bad, lose or almost win or something, and it just completely changes their mentality and they become a different wrestler. My brother beat a kid named Aaron Smith growing up, and he was on his 3rd year going undefeated, and my brother beat him, and he was never the same again. He just never. I think his senior year of high school, he finally got back to the state semifinals undefeated. But he ended up getting beat in the semis, and I think he got beat out. It was back then when it was just the top 4. But something changed in him when he lost. It changed him, and I don't mean to throw that guy under the bus. I don't know where he is right now. I doubt he'll listen to this, but he was something else, and It's a great thing about wrestling. I've seen people that weren't very good that beat somebody, and then it just changed them. And I know that's not the situation with that football coach, but that just reminded me of that in talking about wrestling. And
wrestling is even a kid that can't win very many matches in his life, to go out there and win one was something they'll never forget the rest of their life.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet you've got a lot of stories like that. We're going to talk about the 94 team and all that, but is there one guy you could point to that's the best guy I've ever coached?
The best guy I've ever coached? Boy, that is tough. I don't think I could name one. One that you beat. You beat Don Boone, didn't you?
I never got to wrestle him. He was
he lost before he got to wrestle you.
Yeah.
His junior year, but he had all and he was a guy that was my size, and we practiced every day together. So I think that helped him a lot. But he had as much talent as anybody I ever coached. I shouldn't say he had as much talent. Kenny Taylor had a whole lot of talent. Jerry Corner had a whole lot of talent. Earl Henry had a whole lot of talent, but Don Boone just had the mental makeup that he just wasn't going to get beat by anybody. And he didn't start wrestling until he was a freshman, and ended up winning the state as a junior and a senior.
Yeah. I expected to wrestle him in the finals my senior year when he was just a sophomore. I thought that was going to be the guy, and he ended up losing in the semis to Matt Brandmeier, who he just got on a tear at that tournament, and beat Don in the semifinals. But I remember being happy that Brandmeier had won that, because I had beaten him 5 times, and I'm like, I think I can get him one more time. But I never got to wrestle Don Boone, and I mean, he was just a sophomore. Chances are I could have beaten him, but he went on to be a stud, huh?
He had a grip that just didn't end, and he was just, he was physically talented, but he was just tough. And,
Yeah.
Wrestling, just being tough, goes a long ways.
Yeah.
Just being tough. You don't have to be the most physically gifted guy in the room. He's just tough. Earl
Yeah.
Henry was that way too, but he was physically gifted too. And he only wrestled, he didn't start wrestling until he was a sophomore and was in the state finals his last 2 years and lost to the kid from Manhattan. I can't remember his name, that ended up being the national champion from Iowa State.
Oh, gosh, I can't think who that is either.
I think he ended up being a heavyweight.
Okay. And you mentioned Jerry Corner. Gosh, I kind of forgot about Jerry Corner, but he was two-time undefeated state champ, wasn't he?
Two-time undefeated state champ. I'll tell you a quick story about Jerry. So Jerry, his senior year, he was a really good football player too. His senior year, at Christmas time, I was looking through their grades to see if they're eligible. They had to be past 5 classes. Well, he was only passing 4 classes.
Okay.
Going into Christmas break, and we had 1 week of school left after Christmas. Well, one of the classes he was flunking was algebra, and his teacher's name was Miss Agard, and Coach Sharks, the football coach, we used to call her Miss F Guard because she didn't give anybody an A. she gave everybody Fs, and we said, so there's no way he's going to pass that class. And the other class he was passing or failing was art. He had a guy named Mr. McCrae, and I said, so I went to Mr. McCrae and I said, Mr. McCrae, Jerry's flunking your art class? Yeah, I'm afraid so. I said, is there anything? I said, he's going to be ineligible second semester if he doesn't pass art. Is there any way he can pass it? Well, I don't see how. He didn't turn his portfolio in. I said, well, what's his portfolio? He said, well, that's 50 still life drawings that he had to turn in. Well, if he turns in 50 still life drawings when we come back from break, can he pass your class and get at least a D? Oh, I've never taken it was due a month ago. I've never taken anything in that late. He should have turned it in. I said, Mr. McCrae, if he doesn't pass that class, he's probably going to drop out of school. I don't see him staying in school because he's staying in school because he wants to wrestle. And he's not going to be able to wrestle if he doesn't get a passing grade in art. I said, I'm going to bring you his portfolio after Christmas, and you're going to have to decide if you're going to pass him or not. So every day after Christmas practice, I would take him to my house. I had a big chief tablet with 50 pages numbered 1 through 50, and every day I'd draw that tree, draw that spoon, draw that piece of grass. And so every day he'd come over and I'd make him do like 10 drawings. So after Christmas break, I take the portfolio to Mr. McCrae, and he's paging through it, and he goes, these are the worst still life drawings I've ever seen. I said, Mr. McCrae, he's not trying to be Picasso. I'm sorry that he doesn't have the same appreciation for art that you do. He took your class because he thought it was easy. All he wants to do is pass your class. If you can pass him, we'll get him in a different class second semester. He won't bother you anymore. He's not going to go on and say, I learned how to be an art student from Mr. McCrae. And he ended up passing him. And if he wouldn't have passed him, I don't think he would have finished school. And now he's Dr. Jerry Corner. He went to University of Nebraska, Omaha, where he played football and wrestled, was a 4-time All-American in wrestling, and ended up marrying a girl from the track team. He worked at Boys Town, which, works with boys that, have issues, and they put him in houses. And I guarantee you no boy messed with him in his house.
Yeah.
He had like 8 boys that he took care of. While he was in Boys Town, he worked on his degree, and when he graduated from University of Nebraska, Omaha, he had a 3.5 in Black history, and then he went and got his doctorate in education. He's now Dr. Jerry Corner, and he at that time he was head of Omaha Public Schools, head of the department of the whole Omaha Public Schools, in charge of diversity, probably making $150,000 a year. And if he wouldn't have done those 50 art drawings, he would have never been there.
Huh. So that's crazy that he became a student when he clearly wasn't one at the time.
Yeah, he just, his senior year, he was a little suspect his senior year in the way he was acting, the things he was doing. He was not doing all the right things. His junior year, he was good. His senior year, not so good. And then after that, Well, he went to Garden City and flunked out, and he came to me, and he went to play football, and he came to me and said, "Coach, I really want to wrestle." I said, "You want to wrestle? I want you to wrestle, but you decided you want to play football." And you went up there and flunked out. You lasted 10 weeks. You played 10 games, and then you were done because you didn't go to class. He goes, "Well, would you help me get back in school?" I said, "I don't think you want to really be back in school." And I made him work. I said, "You work for a whole semester and show you can show up every day and go to work." So then I called the Nebraska Omaha coach and got him in University of Nebraska Omaha with Coach Denny, and he did great.
So, he's one of those guys that I knew of, but I never got to see him wrestle much. He was a pretty good big dude, right? I mean, obviously, we know the accolades, but talk about how good he was.
Well, he was, he physically could do it. He had a great duck under, which most heavyweights can't deal with. And he was just physically intimidating. And, when he went to Fargo and was All-American, the interesting story there was, he was they used to have those car washes that were like cinder block walls, 3 cinder block walls, and you would pull into to the car wash into the cinder blocks, and you'd wash your car off.
Mm-hmm.
One of those cinder block walls fell over onto a guy in his car. The whole cinder block wall. Jerry Corner picked up the cinder block wall off of him and saved the guy's life.
Wow.
In Fargo, North Dakota.
Huh.
He just was he started wrestling. He started wrestling for me as a freshman. He'd never wrestled before, and he won most of his matches as a freshman. Then he went undefeated as a sophomore in JV. But I had another pretty good wrestler in front of him that was a state placer. And then when that guy left, Jerry took over and went undefeated for 2 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember how good he was. I remember hoping he'd get beat against Jeff Schreiber. I think that's how you say his name.
Jeff Schreiber.
They had a pretty good match. I think he beat him 5-3 in the finals. And I knew that Jerry wasn't going to lose, but I was sure hoping he would.
I always felt pretty good when we got to the last match. If we were in shouting distance and Jerry was coming up, I felt pretty good about it.
Yeah, and I was such a nerd about it that most people on my team didn't realize like how good Jerry was, and Jeff Schreiber was no slouch, obviously, but I knew that he wasn't probably going to win that match, and but we were sure pulling for him.
yeah, I understand. You guys, I thought that round somebody pulled an upset who I didn't think was going to win from Shawnee Mission West. I don't remember who it was. Somebody in one of the middleweights, I beat somebody that I didn't think was going to beat him, and that kind of put the onus on us that we had to win that match.
Yeah, everybody on that team, myself included, could have done a little bit, just a little bit more. I probably could have got a major decision in the semifinals, and I kind of coasted with a 5-point lead instead of pushing for a major. And everybody on the team could have done something just a little bit different. So, it is what it is as far as that stuff goes.
Well, I about lost the state championship for our team in Kenny Taylor's match.
Yeah, tell us that story.
You knew about that, right?
I believe I do, but...
Well, we were. Kenny Taylor was a sophomore. And he was wrestling, I don't know who, but he was handling the guy pretty good. And he was ahead of him by 8 or 9 points, but we needed, I knew how close the tournament was going to be, and we need a fall. We need bonus points. We don't need just a major decision.
Uh-huh.
And Mark Richards was reffing the match. And, Mark graduated the same year I did. He went to South. He was a state champion at South. You know who Mark Richards was, the official?
I think so.
Yeah, he was reffing the match, and I was sitting in the chair, and the guy's just kind of laying there, keeping himself from getting turned over, just stalling. And I said, "Mark, kid is stalling." And Mark lifts his finger up and kind of shakes it at me to be quiet. And I'm watching a little bit more. I said, "Mark, are you going to call this guy for stalling or not?" He wags his finger at me again. And I said, "Dang it." So I go over to the table. They went out of bounds. I go over to the table. I go, "Buzz him." So they buzz him, and he goes, "Coach, you need to go sit down." And I go, "Buzz him." They buzz, "Coach, you need to go sit down." Well, the third time I said it, when they buzz, he goes, "That's 1 point one point against Wichita West for questioning my judgment. One point, he was taking a point away for unsportsmanlike conduct. And I said, oh, dang, the 1 point we were going to get for getting the major decision, I just lost that point by getting unsportsmanlike conduct.
Yeah.
But the thing was, the Acacia table was right there on the edge, looking over that mat, and all the Acacia guys were there. I don't remember his name. It used to be the wrestling guy, but he was sitting right there watching the match. And I looked at him. I said, after the match was over, I said, I'm protesting that team point taken away. And he goes, we don't have any protests. I said, well, you need to have a protest. How can he take a team point away? I said, he said I was questioning his judgment. I said, did you ever see me come over? Did he come over here and you see me question his judgment? I said, he never came over here. If he didn't come over here, how did I question his judgment?
Right.
And he's just kind of looking at me. And I said, that's a bunch of bull. Mark's just making up rules, and you sitting here watching it. Well, right before the finals, they came up to me and said, you got your team point back.
Huh.
And the coach said, well, you were going to question his judgment, weren't you? And I said, I probably was going to question his judgment. But it says I have to question his judgment. It just looks like I'm going to. And he didn't come over here, so I didn't question it, so he can't take a team point away.
Yeah.
So they didn't take that team point away, and that was the half point that we stuck by.
Yeah, and like I said in a previous conversation that we had, there were times I was like salty about that stuff, and now I'm like, every single person on that team could have done something. My buddy Richie Soto, all he had to do was pull his head out. Like this guy just had him literally just by the head, and all he had to do was pop his head out, and he would have had a reversal. I mean, literally anything would have whatever you'd say, turn the needle or whatever, and literally anything.
Yeah.
So.
And we had 9 guys go. We had qualified 9, and you guys had 13, so I knew that was an uphill battle. But all 9 of our guys won at least one match.
Yeah, what were there, 13 classes back then? We had 12. There was one guy on our team that didn't make it.
Okay, 12. Then.
But, Ryan Howard, my buddy, got 4th at 135, and he should have been in the finals. He had beaten both those guys that year. Even though Matt Wechter was one of them, that guy was a stud.
Matt was a stud.
Yeah. So, it's a funny thing. Matt Wechter and Howard wrestled twice. And both times Wechter was beating him 15-5. Same score. And Howard, I think both times, spladled him and stuck him twice. And I remember him wrestling Wechter for 3rd and thinking, I love you, dude, but your luck is probably going to run out.
Yeah, I'm not getting spladled the 3rd time.
And then I think Wechter pinned Howard for 3rd. But there's a guy named Robert Harvey that Howard always beat, who made the finals, and but then Cheverini was kind of heads above. He was head above all of them anyway. So, but anyway,
saying names bringing back memories.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Kenny a little bit. Talk about how good he was.
Kenny was, he'd come in when he was, wet behind the ears, probably 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. The TOK guys would come in our rooms, especially on Saturdays, and practice with us, and he'd get right with our guys. And he was, they called him Skinny Kenny because he was skinny, but he was tough. And I don't know if you heard this story, but this is probably the story that touches me the most about the whole Taylor family is special. Galen, Kenny Sr., the mom, they're all special. I don't know if you knew, Galen qualified for the state tournament one year, and I ended up getting him disqualified from the state tournament because he had too many points. You were allowed 30 points. So Galen never wrestled till he was a 9th grader, Kenny's younger brother, because he had a spinal issue, and the doctor would not allow him to wrestle. Well, I guess he grew out of it or got stronger or whatever. And finally, when he was in ninth grade, he got to start wrestling. His ninth grade year, he he was wrestling like 135, 140, and we had a bunch of good guys in there in those weights, whatever they were back then, whatever the weight classes were. And the only opening we really had was 125, and he was like 20 pounds bigger than that. He comes to me before Christmas break and says, "Coach, I'm going down to 125 after Christmas." I said, "You're not going to make 125. "Oh, yeah, I am." When he comes back after Christmas and makes 125,
wow,
and goes on a tear. He pins his way through regionals. He had a great lateral drop, and he pins everybody through regionals. Well, I get a call the Monday after regionals from the Acacia. "Hey, Coach, we had somebody say that one of your wrestlers had too many points." And I said, "That's not true. There's no way." Well, will you check and see? And I said, "Well, who is it?" "Well, we're not going to tell you. We're just going to see if you come clean." I said, "Come clean? I'm not." I said, "My guys all nobody has over 30. Well, if our JV wrestled, our varsity wrestled on the same day. So nobody had more points than anybody else, except for right before Christmas break, I had a freshman tournament at West. Only freshmen could wrestle in. And he was wrestling up at the higher weight, and I had forgot about that tournament. And he wrestled 2 times and probably pinned both guys in 20 seconds each. But he wrestled in that tournament, which put him over the amount of points that you could have. And I'm going through looking at each guy, and when I get to that, I start seeing I'd wrestled him in a tournament that I forgot about, and otherwise he would have the same amount of points as anybody else, but he was on the JV at that time. And I call the state and say, "Yeah, I found it, but it's not his fault. It's my fault. Suspend me from the state tournament." And they said, "No, we're not doing that. He's suspended from the state tournament." And I had to call his mother and father after he won regionals and went down to that weight, to 125, and I had to tell him, "Galen cannot wrestle at the state tournament because of a mistake I made." His parents, I know, obviously, they were disappointed. They never said a bad word to me or about me, as far as I know. And imagine that if somebody do that to your son, how you would feel about it. Screw them out of the chance. But they never said. Now, it helped that Kenny won his first state championship that year. And it also helped that Galen ended up being a state champion too. But that was the biggest mistake I ever made coaching. But the parents showed me grace, which I don't know if I could have had if it would have been my son.
But you couldn't have known, though, that he was going to cut down to 125 and all that, right?
Well, I didn't know he was going to make it, but even though I knew, I still should have known how many points he had.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I just had lost track of it. And somebody was watching, and somebody turned us in.
Well, what a...
Because they thought West High cheated anyway.
What a stupid rule.
Well, that's the rule they had. You were under it, too.
Yeah. Well, I had no idea. I'd never even heard of that until this conversation. And Galen went on to be a state champ, too?
He won state as a senior. He placed his sophomore and junior year, and then won it as a senior.
How is he doing now? Is he okay with?
It's a struggle. It's been hard for him.
Yeah.
I know. Before Kenny died, he tried to call Galen, and Galen wasn't available to take the phone call. And you can only imagine, as a brother, what you'd think. Man, if I only got to talk to him. But
well, trust me.
Kenny lives in a lot of people's hearts. He really does. He had a big impact as far as wrestling for sure, and off the wrestling mat. He was funny. We had a rule at West High. We called it the Kenny Taylor rule. He would always be over it. I had a rule that you couldn't leave unless you were within one. And he would always try to sneak out. So I made a rule and he would always take his time, take forever to get his clothes off to get on the scale. hoping that I would leave. So I made a rule. I said, nobody can weigh in until Kenny Taylor weighs in. So they'd be ripping his clothes off him and making him get on the scale. That was the Kenny Taylor rule. So that they could actually weigh in, because I wouldn't let him weigh in until he weighed in.
Yeah, that's funny, man.
But yeah, I miss him. And I saw him the day before, driving down the street.
Well, man.
He was very close to where I live.
Well, trust me, I know exactly what it's like to lose a brother and have not. My brother died very similar circumstances, and my younger brother, and he had called me, and I hadn't returned his phone call. It was when my son was like 2, and when you've got a 2-year-old, especially one that was as high energy as mine, I just didn't have time for a lot of things that I normally would have, and so I get it, and I hope he's doing the best he can with it, because that's tough stuff. I get it. I didn't realize that he went on to be that good of a wrestler. I had no idea. I didn't know about Galen at all.
Yeah, he was a state champ. He was good, and I used to wrestle him up against and I did this a lot anyway. Back then you wrestled a lot more duels than they do now, and a lot of times you're wrestling teams that aren't very competitive, and you end up tossing your team, your guy back to the points. You use points every time you wrestle, and if we're going to use our points, kind of like Eric Aiken, we want to wrestle against good guys, because that's the only way we're going to get good. I'd rather, and I used to say, if we had a guy go undefeated, our schedule wasn't tough enough.
Yeah.
You don't want guys to go out, and that's why we would go wrestle in Oklahoma a lot, because that's where we would see great competition. And our guys, that was kind of funny, our guys didn't know those guys very well, so they'd go out and compete. And they were like, oh, this guy's a 3-time state champion, I can't beat him. Like in Kansas, they start thinking this or that about a guy and already decide in their mind what they can do. We go down there, I said, you just beat a state I did? Yeah, you just beat a state champion. And we'd really grow going down there and wrestling tougher competition. And that's what Eric Aiken was saying.
It's amazing what you can do when your mind doesn't get in the way. Like, I was so, and that was kind of one of my Achilles heels as far as wrestling goes, because I had this friend Derek Lane, and he and I used to sit and talk about wrestling forever. I mean, we'd talk on the phone for hours about who beat who by what score, and I had a memory of it. And if I came across that guy in my bracket or something, I would remember the conversation I had with Derek, and I would build him up into my mind as something better than he was. And sometimes I would lose to these kids. And if I didn't know who they were, there was a time in my life I felt like I could wrestle with just about anybody as long as I didn't know who they were.
Yeah. It seems like it makes a difference.
Oh, man, it's a huge, yeah. So anyway. What other memories do you have from '94? Because there's a lot of them. The Paul Myers, Jeremy Malloy thing. I was curious what you thought of Coach Leonard.
I didn't know Coach Leonard very, very well. He always was very, very nice. I remember that Saturday after we came back, and we won. We were like in 3rd or 4th place, maybe 5th place after Friday night. And I was just looking, I was laying in bed, looking at our matches the next day. And I got to a guy named Ryan McInich. He was our 154-pounder, I believe.
Yeah.
And he, a returning state champion, had been upset from one of the Kansas City schools. I'm sure you know who he was. But we were going to have to wrestle him out the back door. And I was trying to figure out where we were going to get points at, who was going to win it. And I got to him, and I just made a big X. I said, dang it, we got to wrestle the returning state champ. And I just made a big X through the bracket. He goes out and beats the kid, which happens a lot. Kids, just kind of quit wrestling, or they're not achieving what they want to achieve, so they just don't. And he went out and beat him, and that was a big win for us, winning that match at 154. That Ryan beat the returning state and knocked him out of the tournament, and ended up placing for us. Which every point, like you say, every point mattered, every little situation mattered. But that was a big remembrance in that match.
So did you have a feeling that he was going to win the next day?
I I mean, I knew we would compete, but I did not have a feeling that we were going to win. And because if we'd arrested the guy 10 times, we'd probably only beat him twice. But he was ready. He wasn't going to be a state champion, and I think he was ready to go home.
Yeah.
And so that was a big win for us in that match, and so I remember that. And those are the main ones, and then of course the controversy about Paul Myers, that was a big match, and and you may not know this, but so Jeremy Malloy, I never really knew the kid, and once we got to both be coaches, there was a little bit of not liking each other for whatever reason. Probably goes back to the match where he lost to Paul in the last second.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the year that Jeremy died. I just thought, this is stupid. I don't really even know Jeremy. He doesn't really know me. We compete against each other, as far as he coaches at Derby. I coach, I don't know where I was coaching then when he was coaching at Derby, but his son was wrestling, and I said to him one day, and his son was doing pretty good. I said, he was walking by me, and I said, "Hey, Jeremy," and he kind of looked at me like, "Wow." I said, "Your son is really wrestling good today." And from that point on, and he sat down, and we started talking, and we found out he's a good guy. He found out I'm a good guy, and I was really glad that the last year of his life, we were able to kind of put all that behind us, and I cheered for his son, and we got to sit down and talk about life, and that was important, and that's way more important than winning state championships or anything else. Is that camaraderie and the fellowship you can have with another person, just like I have with you, just like I have with him. Find out, man, this guy's not so bad. I thought this guy was a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy.
Yeah. Well, that's part of what I love about wrestling, man. I mean, some of my favorite people, or people that I ended up becoming best friends with, were people that I initially wanted to kill, and all my favorite people throughout my life. It seems like I didn't like them at first, but it's funny you say that about the fellowship. I mean, Nate Carr, he sat down and prayed with my brother and I at the NCAA tournament. Gosh, it's probably been 10 years ago already.
Wow, that's awesome.
And he said, what
precipitated that?
We talked for a long time, but I had already been saved. I mean, I had already, given my life to Christ a long time before that, but he said the prayer with me, and he was like, "This means more to me than getting to watch the finals or any of those things." He's just a very good person.
Yeah. We similar experience, and I don't even remember what it was about, but I saw Nate Carr at the NCAA tournament, just like he did, walking down the hall, and there was something I wanted to tell him or say to him. I don't even remember now. And I went up and introduced myself and talked to him for a second. And he said, "Let's pray about that."
Huh.
And I said, "Okay." He got down on his knees in the middle of the hallway at the NCAA wrestling tournament with people walking all over and prayed right there. He wasn't ashamed of it. And I said, "Wow." And he janked me down kind of on my knees too. I was like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
And we both got down on our knees and prayed right there in the hallway. He's just a different kind of man.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to him. And he was advising me on how to start reading the Bible and all that kind of stuff, and just a salt of the earth person. And my heart kind of broke this weekend for him for David Carr, but he'll be back. He's only 27.
I felt the same way, and he's a strong believer too.
Yeah, the hands on that kid, man. David Carr has the biggest hands I've ever seen. Like, that is a big advantage in wrestling. There was a guy on
Yeah,
my college team that had these ginormous wrists. I mean, to look at this guy, he didn't look like anything. But when you go to tie up his wrists, they were just like twice the size of normal people's wrists. And little stuff like that goes a long way in
yeah.
somebody being a good wrestler, or not as good as other people.
Yeah.
Now the DeShazers is another name that they are linked to the Taylors, right?
Oh, well, they're Danny DeShazer's mother is the sister to Kenny Taylor's mother,
Okay.
and then B.L. Chadwick. I don't know if you remember that name. He's after you, but his mother is another one of the sisters. So they've got a whole thing. So the DeShazers, the Taylors, the Chadwicks, the Hollies. They're all brothers, sisters, married to or whatever.
Okay.
That's and the Knoxes. Uh, Charlie Knox is a brother.
Okay. So they've got quite the little stud family there.
They do. This is a quick story. So my first year at West High, we didn't. When I took over the program, there wasn't much there, and I just had a bunch of. We weren't very good. We qualified a kid for state. I mean, that was my goal: qualify one guy for state tournament, and we qualified one guy. And I kept seeing this. I kept seeing this wrestler from Southeast who was ultra talented physically. That was Danny DeShazer, and I said, but he would do stupid stuff and losing matches he shouldn't lose. I said, man, I would love to coach that guy someday. I think I could coach him. He could be good. And I ran into him that summer, and we start talking. I find out he lives in the West High district. I said, why are you not going to West High? Well, West High wasn't very good in football at that time either. Coach Sharts had just become the football coach. Me and him came into West at the same time, and he goes, well, West High sucks in football, and I go to Southeast because they have a good football team. And I said, well, man, if you ever want to come to West, we'd love to have you. So it was like the second or third day of school. I'm teaching typing, and I see a lady and a guy walk by my door out of the corner. I said, dang, that looked like Danny DeShazer. I walk out and I go, Danny DeShazer. And he turns around and said, what are you doing here? I'm transferring to West. I said, you're transferring to West? He goes, yep. And I said, what happened? He goes, oh, I don't get along with that football coach. So he transferred to West, and he ended up being, the next 2 years, he won state championships that year. And he never placed in state before that.
Huh.
He won a state championship his junior year and won a state championship his senior year. And he beat the kid from Kansas City, Slagle, his junior year, who was really good.
Okay.
And that I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I can't think of it. But anyway, what we used to do is I didn't allow my guys to make weight on Friday night. Back then, you could make weight on Friday night, or you could make a Saturday morning. Unless they were just naturally on weight, I said, no, we're making it Saturday morning. I want you to go out and I want you to win your third match on Friday night, because then you'll be in the state finals. I don't want you to be worrying about your weight, which a lot of guys go out worrying about their weight, and they wouldn't wrestle very good their third match. Well, Danny cut a lot of weight. He was probably natural weight about 133 and wrestled 119.
Okay.
And he went out and wrestled this kid who takes him down with 5 seconds to go in the match to win by 1 point. That kid walks off the mat and makes weight. We walk off the mat, we're 13 pounds over.
Wow.
Now, if we would have been down to weight, would it beat that guy? No.
Yeah.
But we went back, and it took him. I bought a pizza for myself to eat in my coach's office, and we sat in the hot West High wrestling room for about 3 hours, and lost that 13 pounds, and the rest is history.
Huh. That's awesome. Yeah, I remember that. I remember the name Danny DeShazer, and did he have a bald head? Like, did he shave his head?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And he had 2 sons, Tristan and Dap.
Yeah.
Dap's still wrestling.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, in Kansas, at least at one time, so Danny was a 2-timer, Dap was a 3-timer, Tristan was a 4-timer. Between the father and 2 sons, that was the most state championships anybody had ever won.
Wow.
And Tristan and Dap were ultra talented too. And Dap's obviously still wrestling.
Yeah, he ended up winning 2 or 3 Division II national titles.
Yep, I think 2.
Yeah.
And Tristan wrestled Division I. He didn't win any national titles, but I think he made it to the NC2A tournament, I think, at least twice.
Okay. Well, that's awesome, dude. My friend Scott Baker, I was his junior when he was a senior, and he smashed everyone. I mean, he was the best wrestler in 6A that year, probably in '93. I mean, just murdered everyone. And he made it to the state semifinals and was more worried about making his weight than he was smashing this kid in the semis. And he got up 4-0 within no time. And as the match wore on, he just ran out of gas. He had nothing left, and he said he could feel his stomach. I mean, he cut a lot of weight. I remember him coming back from Christmas break weighing 150, and Coach Leonard was going, "Baker, you can't come back from Christmas break weighing 150 pounds." He was, but after first practice, he was down to like 138. But Coach Leonard, I'm glad to hear he was nice to you, because we were all scared to death of him.
I remember when I think I forgot to say this, but at the state tournament, that last round, or the backdoor rounds on Saturday morning, we just started winning. We just won like 13 matches in a row. And every time I'd walk by your coach, he'd go, I see you. I see you. Because I see you.
Yeah.
He knew we were coming.
Yeah. Well, you guys had that second day tournament that we did not have. I mean, we just kept losing and you kept winning, and that's just how it worked out. But so yeah, and Paul Myers, I've had conversations with that guy. You brought those guys to my show in Wichita. Gosh, it's probably been 10 years ago now.
A great time. That was, I've never been to a comedy act, but I been to yours.
Yeah.
That's how much I respected you as a wrestler.
Do you remember anything about me wrestling?
Not a lot, because we didn't get to wrestle you.
Yeah.
We lost before we got. I just remember you won the state championship, and I was hoping just like you were hoping Jerry would lose. I said, "Man, I hope this guy loses." But it wasn't happening.
Yeah. Well, I did everything I could to lose that match. But it didn't work out that way. I drove my coaches crazy. I mean, I would get ahead of everybody in the first 30 seconds. I get up by 5-0 almost on everybody. I did that against Jared Byrne. And then I would just kind of start coasting. And I told Coach Leonard on the way down to state, I go, if I get up by 5, Coach, I will not lose. And I was beating Jared Byrne 6-1 and then 7-2, 5-0, 6-1, 7-2. And ended up beating him 8-6, and he was running me all over that mat, and I was about to die. Wow. And it wasn't until that match was over, or the state tournament was over, really, that I realized how important it was to get a good warm-up, because that match almost killed me, literally. I thought I was going to die in that match. In my semifinals match, I did not even breathe hard, which is another reason I should have majored that guy. But it was because Jared Byrne had blown my lungs out so bad that I was just like breathing through a garden hose, man. It was great.
Those were the days at the old Kansas Coliseum. Those were some great times with three classes in the same building.
Yeah.
I miss that.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah, it seems different now. Like, I've only been able to watch it online, but I'm like, where are all the people? And
yeah. And me and 4A used to just fill up that whole horseshoe.
Yeah.
For all those 4A schools being down there. It was a great time.
Yeah, there were some studs out of 4A too, man. And, I mean, I don't know if I would have won state my senior year had they had just one classification or grand state or anything, because I would have had to wrestle Jeremy Vath from 5A, and that guy was no joke.
He was good.
But I would like to have known, you know.
Oh yeah.
That's something I don't like about the whole class system. I wish everything was just a big state tournament just to see who the person was. But
And now with as much wrestling is going on, it's a lot easier to determine that because those guys see each other now,
yeah,
and most likely have paths have crossed multiple times through freestyle or Greco or whatever,
yeah.
and they wrestle so many more matches.
Well, I won't keep you on here all day, but can you point to one guy that you saw in all your years of being around Kansas wrestling that you think was the best guy you ever saw?
Best guy I ever saw. Man, you put me on the spot here.
Yeah, I should have asked you this ahead of time.
You know, one of the best guys I ever saw, I think, was Doug Hoover
Okay.
from Capon and all. And I'll say that I think that I had a guy, Michael Bradley, which was right in his talent level, but couldn't get everything together. And but him and Doug Hoover would have some matches. But Doug was a great wrestler, and he just went out and just systematically took care of people.
Huh.
Doug Hoover was a great one. I'd have to think a little bit, but you start thinking of some of those four timers, and it's not hard to come up with. Who was great.
Do you remember much about Justin Ware?
I remember, we didn't see Arc City that much, and I know more about him now that he's kind of, doesn't like the spotlight, kind of hides from people.
Yeah.
It seems like, but yeah, I went to Nebraska and was a great wrestler, and one of the better guys at Nebraska.
Yeah, he was ranked 6th in the country and lost a couple of really tight matches. His first NCAA tournament as a redshirt freshman, and he basically just walked away from the sport, walked out of that tournament, and no one ever saw him again. It's just one of those things where you're like, what the hell ever happened to that guy? I think he's like a machinist or something in maybe Arkansas somewhere. I got a hold of him through like WhatsApp, and I messaged him. I can't remember which one it was, but one of those. And I messaged him, and he never responded to me, but, I don't know. That's kind of like the allure of it now. But when I was a kid, man, that guy, there were some good wrestlers out of Kansas, Scott Murray and those guys. And Justin would just spank all of them. All of them.
Yeah, he was. But Arc City had several guys like that.
Yeah.
I remember watching those guys. I was always impressed. That what's interesting to me is I've talked to guys from some of those Arc City teams, and they try to tell me that Dwayne or that what's the coach's name at Arc City? Wayne Jackson.
Yeah.
Wasn't that great on technique. He just got you in shape and made you tough.
Huh.
They said he wasn't a great technique. And I watched Wayne Jackson wrestle in college when he wrestled at K-State.
Mm-hmm.
And he was something else. I watched him wrestle an OU kid OU was wrestling K-State, and I went up and visited, and they were wrestling, and man, those two guys got after it. I don't remember who the OU guy was, but man, they were getting after it, and I'd never seen Wayne Jackson before. I didn't know anything about him.
Yeah, it's funny. Were you good at showing technique? Because I feel like I am terrible at it. My brother is awesome at it. Good at breaking that stuff down, and I always feel so stupid when I'm trying to teach people something because I just kind of felt things and did things that, just kind of came naturally to me. And when I explain them to people, they look at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I don't know exactly.
I think I'm good at, I don't think I was a great wrestler on my feet, but I never got taken down. So I was pretty good. I wasn't going to get taken, I would get takedowns, but I didn't think I was, I wasn't, Kenny Taylor could wrestle on his feet. Danny DeShazer could wrestle on her feet. But now I could wrestle on the mat. I was really good on top, I thought, and I never got turned. So I was good on the mat, and I think I was pretty good at showing technique there, but I I wasn't great on my feet because I didn't, I just didn't have a coach that taught me.
Yeah.
And I think, and you may think the same way, and there's no disrespect to any of my coaches, but I didn't, like my high school coach never even wrestled before.
Yeah.
And, I didn't know he was good or bad, but he never wrestled before. So how's he going to teach me technique over Dwayne Miller, who's the coach at Cape, who was a national champion for OU? And, it's easy to see why those guys were so good because they were good on their feet.
Yeah. Well, Coach Leonard didn't know a lot either, but we were, I don't know what his wrestling background was. His son, both of his sons were state champions. One of them was a two-timer and only lost, I think, 7 times in high school. But I don't think Coach Leonard had much experience, but he had us, we were scared of him. And he was a very intimidating dude, and we did not want to disappoint him. And worked us like dogs. I mean, I remember almost every practice I would get in my head like, today's the day. I'm going to have to pretend I'm sick and go in the hallway or get a drink of water because he wouldn't hardly let us have water. And I was like, I've got one of those in me. He'll buy it one time. Today's the day. And every day I would get to that point. And then it's weird how your cardio, something kicks in, and all of a sudden you go from I'm gonna die to I'm okay.
Yeah.
And every day in practice that would happen. But every day, probably until the end of the season, I was like, today's the day.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you a question. So, how do you feel wrestling has that impact on your comedy, your life as a comedian? Has it helped you being a wrestler? Has that helped you as a comedian?
It's probably the main reason that I knew I could do it, even though it terrified me, because wrestling also terrified me. And I remember my last college tournament asking myself, like, why are you still doing this to yourself? Like, it was so nerve-wracking to me, all the way through it. But it made me...
Was that at Labette?
Yeah. And it made me think, when I decided to be a comedian, I was like, I know how to get through those nerves, even if they feel crippling at the time. And so in that regard, yes, wrestling helped me quite a bit when it came to comedy, and I still calm myself down the same way. I don't like to talk to a lot of people. I like to be alone. I like to breathe. I like to pray. I just like to be left alone. And people have this misconception about comedians a lot of times that they are that's just part of who they are and whatever. And I'm like, no, I can barely talk sometimes before I go up there. I just need to be left alone. And that's how I was in wrestling. And that's something else Coach Leonard understood. He understood his athletes. We used to do this handshake, and we never spoke about it. But it was a handshake that only he and I had, and it's hard to explain the handshake. But one time we did it before like the regional finals, and we just shook hands like normal. And I remember in my head thinking, "Oh shit, we didn't do the handshake." And right before I walked out there, Coach Leonard goes, "Gaither, come here," and I went over there and he gave me the handshake. Like he knew this is important to him. This calms him down, So yeah. Well, man, I'll let you get out of here, but I could talk to you all freaking day. We might have to do a part 2 sometime. I didn't really get to any of the questions I had for you. I just, and those are the best ones. I usually.
I appreciate you calling me and helping me live through some of those memories. And I follow you on Facebook, obviously, and every now and then you put something funny on there that makes me laugh. So I appreciate what you're doing, and especially the way you're raising your son, what you share with me, and how much you're being a part of his life. And man, that's what it's all. That's what it's all about, and that's what God put wrestling in our lives so we could raise our sons and So I'm honored to talk to you, Tim.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and I'm trying, man. Sometimes I fail miserably, and I feel like I apologize a lot to him because I just want to be. I think I put too much pressure on myself sometimes, wanting to be everything that he needs me to be for him, and I don't always know how to do it, and it comes out in frustration more at myself than at him, and he's also a very stubborn, strong-willed little boy. I mean, good Lord. And it's a challenge, man. I don't have to tell you. It is a hard thing to be a good parent. I'm sure it'd be easy to just stick a device in their face and, you know, it'd be easy to be a terrible parent, but it is hard to be a good one, man.
Well, the point is you recognize that, and you're trying to be a good parent. And, I'm the same way. I have a son, and he's grown now. But when our pastor says, when you fess up or when you mess up, fess up, and that's what you say that you're doing, and your son sees that every time, and he'll remember that, and that's what's gonna make your relationship. He knows Dad's not perfect, but he knows that Dad loves him, and that's the main thing. As parents, I know that with my son was a pretty good athlete, and I just had to make sure that when he came home, it wasn't Dad the coach, it was Daddy, and this was an oasis for him where he could come home and he was loved, no matter if he struck out, no matter if he missed a block, no matter if he didn't get the takedown. He'd come home, he was loved. And I know that you're doing that with your son, and that's gonna be huge in his life, and it's already huge in yours.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I wish, sometimes I wish that I didn't want him to wrestle as much as I do, just because I want to be a wrestling dad, and I have to make sure that he's not doing it for me. And at this point in his life, he's only 7, but he seems to have, like, when we wrestle around, I'm like, this kid does a lot of natural things. But when it comes to wrestling other little kids, it does not seem to be in him at all. At least not like it was when I was that age. So I have to make myself realize that, first of all, this sport might not be for him,
mm-hmm.
and I have to make sure that it's not, something that's just, for me or whatever. Did your boy wrestle, and did he want to do it?
Well, so I think he was probably 6 or 7, about your son's age, and he was around wrestling growing up because he got under practice and everything. And then we decided to try kids wrestling, and at WWC, Wichita Wrestling Club. And Boo Dryden was the older Boo Dryden. He was the coach, and he was kind of a hard guy, especially on 6, 7, 8-year-olds. And my son hated it, and he would come home. I don't want to, he'd make up excuses. I don't want to go, but I'd make him go Dad, my leg hurts today. Dad, I said, you're going to finish the season. You're going to wrestle and finish the season. And he did. He finished the season. And by the time the next year got there, when's wrestling start? I said, no. I said, you are not ready to wrestle. I said, you can come to my practices, but we're not going to do kids this year. And I was busy with my team, obviously, coaching my team. And he never really got back into kids, but he was always around. He was up at my practices, and he would scrap a little bit in my practice. Well, then we got to, and he was a really, really good football player, really, really good baseball player. And so we get to Height. So his 8th grade year, I started coaching at Heights with Coach Church. And I said, I'd pick him up from middle school, and I'd take him to wrestling practice. He kind of started whining again. I said, hey, just consider this getting ready for football and baseball as workout. We're going to just training. And we had great guys in the room back then, Matt Reed and Daniel DeShazer what's his name that coaches in Missouri. Um, and so Grant would go up there every day and wrestle and did pretty good. Well, so his ninth grade year, he started on the varsity in football, started on the varsity in baseball, and he was only behind Matt Reed in wrestling. He had picked, even though he didn't really wrestle competitively kids too much, he was pretty good. And I think he went undefeated and won a couple matches on the varsity when Matt Reed didn't wrestle for whatever reason. And I told him, and he didn't want to wrestle that year as a ninth grader. And I said, no, you're going to wrestle as a ninth grader. You're going to wrestle. And I said, your sophomore year, I'll let you make the decision. Well, he came to me after football season his sophomore year. He started again in football. And he goes, Dad, I didn't get to go home one day after school last year because I had football, then I had wrestling, then I had baseball.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm not going to wrestle this year. And I said, I told you could make the decision when you're a sophomore. And if you don't want to wrestle, that's fine. And Coach Church was mad at me because he was going to be our varsity guy.
Yeah.
He was mad I graduated. But it all worked out.
Yeah.
And he could have been a good wrestler if he wanted to be, but he also loved baseball the most. And I think he loved baseball the most because I couldn't coach him in it.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell him why he couldn't hit the curveball or why his curveball wasn't breaking, or I could just be Dad.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to wrestle, but I also wasn't. It didn't hurt me that he didn't wrestle because he played two other sports that he was really good at.
Yeah. Well, this sport is so freaking hard, and it's even if you're good at it, you don't want to do it half the time. I know I didn't, and I have to remember that. And I think he's a little athlete. He can be good at whatever sport he chooses. His mom was a good athlete, and if sports are even his thing, I hope they are because I can just see it in him. But I never want him to think that he's only loved because of that.
Right.
And
no, for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of kids end up feeling that way, and they end up really holding it against their parents that made them feel that I only have value if I win or I do good at wrestling, and we just got to make sure we don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're going to do good. You got your wife there keeping you in line, and you said she was a good athlete, so she knows.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna love him as much as I can and see what happens.
Well, do it, because those days go by fast. I miss those days going to baseball practice, I coached him in football, but I didn't coach him in baseball. Just being able to watch him play.
Yeah, it used to annoy me when people would tell me how fast it goes, and now that he's 7, I'm the guy on airplanes going, enjoy it,
Yeah.
But yeah, life's going fast. I'm glad we got to do this, and I'll let you know. It'll probably be out tomorrow. So.
All right, Tim.
Yeah, God bless you, man. Thanks very much for doing it and taking the time, and I have a lot of respect for you, and I'm glad we got to do this.
Hey, love you, brother. Thanks for calling.
I love you too, man. I'll talk to you later.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody. Jeff Watkins. I love this sport. It is such a good... it produces so many good people, and, there was a time in my life I probably didn't like that guy for no other reason than he was the coach of the team that beat us by half a point my senior year. But now that I've spoken to him some through Messenger, and he brought his boys to my show, some of the guys from the Wichita West team. I'm sorry if there's anybody on that team that we didn't give a shout out to. We didn't even talk about the 2006 team. Good Lord. They won a state title in 2006, and we didn't even talk about that. I am so sorry to anyone who was on the 2006 team. Dang it, I do regret that. But sorry, guys. So much to talk to when it comes to this sport, and we only scratched the surface. So I hope you guys are enjoying these podcasts so far, and thanks for subscribing to the new channel. And if you haven't done so, please do. And that's it. God bless all of you. Take care, and thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.